Imagine being responsible for managing the exponentially growing data footprint of your organization. You'd be struggling to break down silos of data while grappling with user access, backup, and security. Enter Peer Software. Since 1993, they've been revolutionizing the way businesses manage and synchronize data across the globe. Yes, it's a global file system, but it's also so much more. This is episode 84. Hello and welcome to episode 84 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name's Anthony Spiteri, and this episode we're talking to a company that lives in the world of distributed file systems, breaking down storage silos today in an era where data is more important than ever. A company that has been simplifying these processes and products since 1993, that's 30 years. Today we're thrilled to feature Peer Software, and joining me today is the CEO of Peer Software, Jimmy Tam. Welcome to the show, Jimmy.
Thank you for having me, Anthony.
Awesome. Hey, Jimmy, just before we get into distributed file systems and global storage and whatnot, as a reminder, if you love great things with great tech and would like to feature on the future episodes, click on the link on the show notes, head to gtwgt.com on the internet, go to YouTube at gtwgt.com, hit subscribe and like, all the usual stuff, and on the podcast channel as well. Please just like us, tell your friends, tell your family. We're here to have a great time talking technology. All right, Jimmy, before we talk about Peer Software and the journey of a 30-year-old company now in storage, which is crazy in itself, what about a bit of background about you? You joined the company in 2007, but give us a bit of background about you and how you came to be CEO at Peer.
I've actually had a very weird journey in the tech space. I graduated with an accounting and finance degree from UC Berkeley, so I'm actually an accounting and finance guy first and foremost that eventually stumbled into tech during the dot-com boom of the mid to late 90s. And so kind of did that career transition. And then as I was moving through there, then I met a bunch of friends and colleagues that we eventually created a strategy and consulting firm,
Okay.
helping companies do product marketing strategy, product development strategies for software companies around the world. Peer was actually one of our customers, and that's how I fell into Peer.
So you're an accountant by trade, but going to Berkeley, right? Like Berkeley is kind of a pretty strong university when it comes to technology, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic technology. I don't know why. I have no idea why I fell into accounting and finance and first and foremost, but it actually was one of the reasons why I got into tech. I was actually, when I first started my career, doing accounting and finance software integration. So really focused, like mirroring technology and accounting and finance background together. And that's how I got into understanding software.
That's a logical step. It's not like that's a stupidly hard pivot out of nowhere, right? Like you're kind of in and around that world, and you obviously had some fascination with the technology side of it as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of my accounting customers, when I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers many years ago, the VP of finance told me she couldn't find a technologist who understood accounting and finance, and couldn't find a accounting and finance person who understood technology. So she literally bought me a bunch of books, gave it to me, pushed it over the desk and say, I'm going to bet that you can learn technology faster than those other guys can learn accounting and finance. And that's how I started.
There you go. Well, from that sounds of it, you owe her quite a bit in terms of your career, right? There you go.
Her name is Julie Gentili. If you're out there,
there you go, Julie. You get a shout out. There you go. You didn't even know, but you get a shout out. So then, walking through that, helping in accounting and tech and helping people navigate that. How did you transition into being at Peer as well?
Well, the transition was interesting. It was a journey. When I was doing the integration for accounting and finance, we were working. The customer was a multinational organization that had accounting software everywhere. And to integrate this, to get the data moved, back in the day in 1996, there was a software program called LapLink. I don't know if you remember it. It used to be a yellow cable. You'd actually have to bring a yellow cable and connect your laptop to the server or another computer, and that's how you did the data transfer.
Yep, makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's how it used to be done in the old days. And then when I stumbled upon Peer years ago, they were already doing replication over the air, over the wire,
Hmm.
without the wireless even,
Yeah.
right? And in real time. And so it just made a lot of sense to me to remove the cable itself and be able to transport data from one point to another seamlessly and quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So you didn't join the company as CEO though, right? Like take us through that journey because I think it's quite fascinating.
Yeah. So when I first met Pierre, I mean, it was probably a very typical American um, tech startup feel to it. Still, it was only 4 or 5 engineers writing great code,
Wow, yeah.
selling it on the internet. Right? We had a website, just sold it on the internet. You'd buy it with a credit card, and but they didn't have a big, they didn't have any sales and marketing presence. So when I we found each other, that's how they hired our firm to first start helping them build out their sales and marketing strategies.
Yeah,
A lot
okay.
we
Makes
joined
sense.
on just as a sales and marketing consultants.
Oh, there you go. So you started as in sales. That's crazy. So you mentioned the company was pretty small up to then, but let's
Mhm.
let's let's take a step back to 93. Start of the company. Like what was the genesis of the company? Who founded it? And also what was the value prop even back in 93? Because were very different 30 plus years ago, right?
Yeah, in 1990. So the original Genesis was so the founder is Paul Marsala. He is still our chairman, founder, and CTO today.
There you go.
And his problem was exactly like what the problem I had, was just how do you move data from point A to point B? As simple as that. And he wrote a program to replicate data across Windows systems because I think back in 1993, for those who've been around the storage industry world for a long time, or Microsoft world a long time, Microsoft didn't have a good replication engine back then. And so
No.
Paul went out to solve that problem, to just replicate two or more Windows servers together.
Wow.
And he wrote that program, put it on the website, and people started finding and buying it.
So we're talking like Windows 3.1, well, pre
Oh
95
yes,
here, right? Yeah.
yeah, a
So it's
long time.
like,
I don't even remember the version from
yeah.
1993.
I mean, people are like, I'm thinking because I was playing computer games on it back in those days with the
Yeah,
DOS and the Windows and stuff, and that was the genesis of that time period. So it's actually quite fascinating because I would never have considered back then how do I take a file from this computer that I've got here and move it to this computer and not use a disk.
yeah, you use the floppy disk, right? Exactly.
Exactly. So solving the problem. So and then how did it grow? Like what was obviously much different today to where it was in the 90s, but what was the sort of step up from 93 and the genesis of that into the, say, pre.com 2000s? What was going on there? Was there customers that actually found the software and started using it at scale, or it wasn't distributed back then, was it? It was more just point to point, I
No,
would have
no.
thought.
It was just a point. Yeah, yeah. Back then, it wasn't about distributed file services. Back then, it was very much about backup, making another copy, and it was very much a point-to-point solution, point A to point B. But customers started buying it at scale, and our largest customer was actually one of the U.S. government entities, and
Hmm.
they found us. I think it's 1998, and they bought 10,000 copies of the
Wowzers.
point-to-point solution, and so that kind of put us on the map. And then the company started growing from there and getting larger and larger customers.
Yeah, talk about an anchor client, right? That's like a classic anchor client to build and do more with, right? So, and peer, does the name? I'm always interested in the name of companies that I have on the show. Is there any significance? So, I mean, I'm thinking peer-to-peer networking, that sort of thing. I mean, is that pretty much what it is?
It evolved to become that, but the original one was actually more interesting than that. I actually found in some of our archives the original logo. The original logo, and I think the original idea of the company was PIER, like a
Okay,
pier,
a peer.
right?
Okay,
A pier. And so the logo was actually a pier that goes out into the water. But then when we started selling software, we started getting a lot of German customers, oddly enough, American-based companies selling software on the internet in the mid 90s. German customers started buying it, and they couldn't pronounce. They kept saying pronouncing PIER as PEER,
I
pair,
get it.
because
Yeah.
peer networking. So we said, if you can't beat them, join them. All right, our company's Peer Software.
That's awesome. That's a good story. I love that. So then in terms of the genesis, I mean today you've got a couple of different core products: Peer GFS, Peer Sync Migration, Peer IQ, pure FSA, there's these products that you have today, but in the early 2000s, what was the focus? How did it shift from, that point to point to, obviously the internet became more important. People were using file systems. We had the genesis of things like object storage and S3 and these cloud-based storage solutions, and people were realizing that the cloud and block storage was becoming important. So what was Pia doing during that sort of 2000s period?
So, so the genesis, actually, we have to thank Microsoft a lot, right? So like
Mm,
any good technology company, you learn to pivot and you learn to evolve. 2003 was the pivotal year. In 2003, Microsoft advanced their own replication technology. Prior to that, it was called something called FRS, and then it became
yep.
DFS replication.
I
And that
used it
was like,
a lot. Yeah.
yeah. So DFS replication was actually pretty good. And so what happened when that came out was companies say, hey, instead of one-way point to point, I can do bidirectional synchronization now. And that pushed us to evolve. Because of that bidirectional synchronization capability, companies, you started coming to us and say, we don't want to buy your point-to-point solution anymore because Microsoft already has that and it's pretty good. But
Yeah.
what we need you to solve is if we're replicating data across two sites and it's mirrored and it's active, if I open a file site A, how do I prevent a version conflict from happening in site B? How do I lock it down? So that was the question that started coming from customers in 2003,
Mm.
2004 that we had to pivot and solve.
I completely agree, and actually my mind is taking me back to all of those conflicts that we used to have with DFSR and everything like that. And it was a nightmare, right? And when it broke, it broke hard, right? And it
And
was
it broke hard.
horrible. So having something over the top of it was useful. It's funny. I was just thinking, Microsoft have this long-standing tradition of seeing something in the market that works outside of their own sphere, and then basically replicating it and copying it and doing it themselves. They still do it today, right? They're so good at it. But to that point, what it actually means is that companies like yourselves have to look at it and go, well, Microsoft are kind of cutting out into our space a little bit. If we're going to survive and thrive, what are we going to do to make this better? How are we going to build on top of what they've done? And I think that's pretty much, what Microsoft end up, facilitating in the tech industry is that, right? So that's quite interesting.
That is actually a great point because I was able to validate that. I was a few years after 2003, so this is probably 2009, 2010. I had the opportunity to meet one of the longstanding Microsoft DFS product managers.
Cool.
He was working at an analyst firm at the time, and I asked him, I'm like, this file locking problem, this distributed version conflict problem, why didn't Microsoft solve it? I asked him, I go, why didn't Microsoft solve it? And he went, and he said exactly what you said. He goes, Microsoft, what they try to do is to make some big bets,
Yep.
and they're going to go all in on that technology. And that time it was SharePoint. And then they're going to make a bunch of smaller bets to seed the market, to show people what's possible. And that's what they did with DFSR. But they chose not to solve the file locking problem. Not that they didn't know it existed. They chose
Mm.
not to solve it because to allow third-party partners like ourselves to go after that space. And they go, right, we made other bets. The rest of the market here, we'll leave it to you guys to enhance.
There you
And
go.
so that was a great answer, and I really appreciate it because that
Yeah.
allowed us to kind of continue to grow and evolve
Yeah.
that space.
That's good, yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of what Microsoft do even today. Okay, so take us. I mentioned the products. Maybe just quickly take us through the products. I've had other sort of global file system providers on the show, a couple of them, a couple of years and last year as well. So I'm interested in what you guys are doing and where you guys are slightly different, and how you are sort of still, capturing your customers and keeping and retaining them after 30 years.
Yeah. So our product lines, like as you mentioned off of the website, there's Pure GFS, which stands for Pure Global File Service. There's the Pure Sync Migration, Pure IQ, which is our newest product line, which is a data intelligence product line.
Cool.
And then there's Pure File System Analyzer, Pure FSA for short. But our flagship is always going to be the Pure Global File Service, Pure GFS.
Yep.
And that is our distributed file service. And the main way to kind of, as you mentioned, you said you've talked to multiple distributed file companies over the last months, quarters, years. What differentiates us the most is the fact that we are not a storage company, whereas most, probably all the other companies you've talked to, they are actually storage companies. They will sell you the storage and
Hmm.
the storage OS um, for your storage infrastructure environment within your environment globally. We, however, are a software-only company, and we partner with the major storage providers out there and provide a distributed file service to overlay on top of that.
Makes sense. So, okay, when you say that, I mean, obviously the software goes out, it gets installed. I'm guessing it can be installed pretty much on any system, or is there a specific system it can be installed on? Yeah,
Yeah, only the companies that we partnered with so far. So we went out to our customers and we asked them like, what are the main storage vendors that you use today for the markets that we go after? Obviously, most companies are going to start with a Windows file server.
yeah,
So they're a partner. So Microsoft's a big partner of ours. And then as they get bigger, they're going to evolve to NetApp or Dell EMC storage. So those two are longtime partners for us as well. And then over the last few years, we've also partnered with Nutanix with their file system, Nutanix
yeah.
Files, Nutanix Unified Storage. And then for the cloud providers, we partner with Azure and AWS. So
Cool.
for our customers are going to have some kind of a combination of Windows, NetApp, Dell EMC, Nutanix, Azure, and AWS. And we find that that covers a large percentage of customers, companies.
Do do you still? I mean, a lot of people today, if you talk to a bunch of net new developers or net new
Mhm.
application guys or whatever it might be, people coming out of uni today, like this new generation, they would go, "What's Block? What's NetApp? What's this?" Right? But my interpretation is that it's still pretty widely used in terms of that combination of traditional file system, some sort of storage, and now what we're seeing is cloud-based storage as well, be it object storage or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. So, is that still for you? Obviously, this is your bread and butter, but what's your thoughts on what you've seen, and especially over the last maybe 5 years in terms of an evolution of have companies shifted somewhat, or is it still pretty much fundamentally file, block, storage, object?
Yeah. So you there's file storage, as you mentioned, there's block storage and object storage. And traditionally for enterprise companies, it's going to be file and block mainly, right?
Yeah.
So, and for us, for our app, what we support is we're a peer global file service. So we support the file side. And if
Hmm.
it's block, most companies are going to use block storage either for structured data, like databases of some sort, or they're going to overlay that block storage with some like Windows file server or a Linux system, right? And which
Yeah.
then becomes another file server, a file system to us. So again, we focus on the file side of the house. Now, I do see, obviously, a lot of people are talking about object storage today,
Yeah.
right? S3 object storage, whether it's AWS or if you're an Azure person, Azure Blob. But what we're finding for most of our enterprise customers is that object storage is mainly still a backup target. It's just a backup target. Or unless you're a born in the cloud application company, a born in the
Yes.
cloud company where your new application speaks object natively. But
Hmm.
all the traditional application, enterprise applications generally will speak file.
Yes.
No,
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense, right? That's true, and that's not changing quick. I mean, there's a lot of transitional change that needs to happen for that to flip or turn the needle, so it's not the majority, right? So, and I don't think it will happen basically for the
I don't think it's going to
short
happen
to
at
medium.
all.
No.
The reason being is the application developers they don't under, they speak file. They're saying that's a storage problem. We're
Yeah.
still going to write our applications the way we've always written the applications. We're going to write it to file. And it's up to the storage companies now to do any type of translation. If you want to relay it out from file to object, you can do that at the storage side, do that translation. But
Yeah.
also, what I find is, people are thinking about for like highly performing applications, like eventually you start thinking about what we're trying to do now with AI and ML. File still for a lot of workloads is still the most highly performing storage system out there, especially if it's iterative and random in nature.
Yeah.
Whereas more sequential data is going to be much more focused on object storage. So people
Get you.
always think, oh, object storage can solve everything. No, you kind of just have to choose the right storage, right tool for the right task.
That's a really good way to put it, right? So let's not shoehorn. And I think the analogy that I can kind of use is people we're told, okay, we've got to go from on-prem, workloads, be it VMs or whatnot, you've got to go to the public cloud because that's just the future. And so a lot of people shoehorn themselves and lifted and shifted in the public cloud. And now what we're seeing is a lot of repatriation because now
Mhm.
that's not fit for purpose. It's too expensive. It's not performing well. People are pulling it back. There's this hybrid world that we're settling on. And so this storage part of that play is still pretty much the same there. And I think that's where the GFS, comes into play. So it sits on top. And what do you surface? Because the way that I look at this is that what you're doing fundamentally is you're taking silos of data, silos of files, and you're presenting them up in one nice location. And that is fundamentally, I guess, what you guys do best, right?
Yes and no. So we don't present it as one location.
Okay.
Our customers actually want a multi-master system, actually.
Okay, I get you. Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. We work with a lot of multinational organizations. Let's say you have 10 offices in the US, 10 offices in Europe, and 10 offices in Asia and Pacific or Australia and New Zealand. And there are, especially in a global distributed workforce, you have pockets of expertise everywhere. And so
Yeah.
you might have a data set where the master of that data set is in the US, and then everybody around the world needs a copy of that or a subset of that. And then you have another project team that where the master of that their data set, which is unique to them, is in Europe. And then everybody wants a subset of that globally. And then another team that where their expertise and their master data set is in Asia. And then everybody gets a subset or replica of that. So in our world, it's not just the data is in one place and then we disseminate out from there. We give customers the ability to truly be flexible in how they organize their storage infrastructure or where the data
Okay.
resides based on where their global centers of excellence are.
I get there, and that's a pretty big differentiator then, right? In terms of what I've other global file systems that I kind of know, which are simply more aggregation points, right? So you're
Mhm.
doing more organization, giving your customers more flexibility in the data they can access, and you've also got the edge feature set in there
Caching.
as well, which is really
Mhm.
interesting because that's all about efficiency of data at the edge and stubbing as well. You've got the stubbing functionality, which
Mhm.
I just saw you released in one of the latest versions. So that's really interesting, and that's the smarts around it as well. It's bringing the right data to the right people. I think that's kind of the
Yeah.
way that I'd
That's
summarize it.
exactly it.
There you go.
Exactly it. You can
There you go.
have a fully replicated copy, or you can have a cached subset of that copy across different heterogeneous storage systems if you wanted to.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the customers that you have. I know that you've 30 years is a long time in IT. It's a long time in this industry to not be acquired or something happen or an event. And I believe you were telling me earlier off show that you're basically self-funded organic, no VC funding, which is absolutely crazy these days in the world of tech, right? So talk a little bit about that and how you've been able to basically keep the company rolling and getting bigger just based on almost a self-perpetuating flywheel.
Absolutely. I think I always call us the strangest beast in enterprise software. 30 years organic, no VC, like you said, no private equity, no debt, profitable 30 years in a row.
Wow.
And I always describe us to our customers. I go, we're just geeks who code. We like to write great software that we stand by. We license it to our customers, and we have no place to hide. So it better work. So I think that's been the key to our success, and the fact that year over year over year, we're constantly listening to what the customers want and how their business is evolving so that we continue to adapt our software to them versus the other way around, right? Other way around. And being just hyper focused on their needs, we've been able to build that business. Um, and so we've been very grateful for all of our customers who stayed with us. We always say that if you're a customer for less than 5 or 10 years, you're probably a newbie. Most of our I still get calls from customers. I sold on my first month here at Peer 17 years ago. They're still customers, which is
That's yeah.
fantastic.
Isn't that amazing? Like, and you think about that, it's from a longevity perspective. Like if we go back to what we talked about, file block, object storage. I think especially in that storage platform world, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of shift, there's a lot of let's get a new platform in. The incumbents are okay, but we can easily shift now because we've got to grow here and we've got to pull this in. So in the storage world, there is a lot of movement of vendors because I think it's just people kind of expect and almost need that to validate some sort of purchase or whatever it might be. But you're effectively got these really, steadfast clients because I think what I'm hearing here is at the core, you're a company with a soul. And I think that's something that doesn't happen very often these days, where a lot of companies are built to sell. They've got if you bring in an external VC funding or private equity, there's a return that's expected, there's pressure put on, the focus shifts, right? So I think it's quite it's refreshing for me to talk to a company that's got a soul. And it's not a shame to be that because you've obviously produced really good, reliable software as well. That would be a key to it, right? You've got to have, especially in this space, reliability is so important.
Oh, I think for us is one of the reasons people always ask me, why didn't you take funding? Why didn't you take funding? Or why did you sell already? And if you think about the core of what we do, the ability to create distributed file services across heterogeneous storage, we needed to be independent. We needed to be, storage Switzerland, so to speak, and enable that for customers that wanted that flexibility, that adaptability in their storage infrastructure. And if we sold, all the customers that bought into the ideology that we're espousing, we pretty much pulled the rug underneath them and go, oh, we're just going to go here. And so we've stayed true to that mission for a long time now.
I love that. I think that's really great. And you believe in it as well. I can tell. It's and I get when I talk to certain founders and CEOs and tech leads, I absolutely can tell when they're fully invested in the company. So that's awesome. Let's pivot a little bit to a talk about data protection and backup relevant to my space of the world. But data is so critical. But how does Peer play in that data protection space? I know you've got some functionality there. I'm interested to hear how you guys play.
So when I think about data backup or data resiliency, right? I think about a couple of things. Number one is going to be high availability, right? So how do we're in an always on world these days. So first and foremost, we shine best in regards to high availability, meaning that multiple systems are fully hydrated and active. And if one system fails, you can automatically fail over to another system immediately. So we always talk about near zero RPO and RTO, first and foremost, from that high availability perspective. The second thing is then, well, okay, how about my long-term retention? That's where our object storage comes in. We actually do our integration with object storage, whether it's S3 or Azure Blob, very differently from most companies. Okay. Most companies are going to snapshot their data and then move it up as just one snapshot. We're actually sending every file as a separate object and completely non-proprietary, no encapsulation to it, completely open, so that AI or ML or any type of cognitive services can mine that data for information. And we do that because we thought years ago, people are going to want to mine their data for something. And by doing backup a little bit differently with object storage, that's what we've kind of moved into. And then we've also, I think you've seen it probably some of our old previous press releases. We also do a lot of monitoring and alerting for cybersecurity, potential suspicious or malicious events.
Oh, okay. Let's dig into that. How does that work? Is that a particular feature? Is that the IQ feature? What's going on there?
So the IQ feature is going to enhance it. But today we have a feature called malicious event detection. So Pure Med, a little funny story as an aside. The original name of that product line was the Suspicious Activity Detector.
Okay.
But that acronym was SAD. And we go, we're not.
I was just making it up, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Bro, we're not going to.
It works to a certain extent, right? Because if you do get hit by a malicious guy, it's going to make you sad. So it could have worked. Yeah.
Could have worked, but we're not going to sell sad stuff. So we changed it to malicious event detector called Pure Med. It works in a couple of different ways. Number one, we partner with third-party cybersecurity experts that give us the patterns of malware and ransomware that is occurring in the world
Interesting.
today.
Okay.
And we insert those digital fingerprints, for lack of a better term, into our software so that as we see real-time file event streams as they come into all the storage systems in the world,
Uh-huh.
we take a look at those file event streams and compare it to those digital fingerprints that we know that are bad. And if we see something that looks like that, we immediately alert the IT administrator, stop replication, and disable the agents,
Mm.
the systems that we're on. So that's one thing we do. The other things we do is if you turn it on, is we also intersperse a bunch of hidden um, bait files and trap folders into the system. So you almost
Okay.
think of these as kind of like honeypots or
Honeypot, I was going to
tripwires
say.
in the system.
Yeah,
And if something touches those things that shouldn't, again, alert goes out, and
that's
then it
cool.
stops the replication, because the last thing we want to do is to replicate a potential malicious or suspicious event around the
Mm.
world. And so
No.
we be able to put a firewall in place for that.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's a really good use case for it. Actually, I didn't think about the fact that you control the data in and out, and you've got visibility of what's happening that you can insert this
We're literally mining the digital fingerprints, like, because we know like a
at a lower
WannaCry,
level.
yeah, it gets at a file level event stream, because that's where we're integrated, which will
Yeah.
also start telling you where we're going with our technology, because everything we do is at a file level. We see everything that happens on every single
Hmm.
storage systems we're connected to. Every open, close, add, delete, and modify. Everything by the person, by the application, by the time of day, by the locations. So
Yeah.
if you think about all this data that we're collecting, and today we do a very simplistic thing about saying, oh, this file's added here, we'll replicate it over there, we'll add it over there. This modified here, we'll modify it there. But if you take those file event streams and then start putting it into something like PureIQ, the analytics engine, start
Mm.
putting artificial intelligence or machine learning into it, your mind can start thinking about what information I'm able to present back out long term.
Yeah, and I think we might as well finish off with the whole AI conversation, right? Because it's very important for today. And you guys, again, like you said, you control this stream of data for your customers, so you've got almost the best visibility as to what's happening, right? So, um, I and I think it's all about the concept of unlocking data for the customer, where customers and companies have been creating data like more than ever, right? But typically, they've only seen this as a point of cost. Like, okay, costing me more to store it, costing me more to manage it. It's costing me more in terms of, if something goes wrong with it, this is like my business and my reputation at risk. So it's this sort of this, it's good, it's costing money, but it's also very dangerous, right? So I think customers and companies and organizations want to get more out of their data because of what it's fundamentally costing them at that end. So AI and ML technologies are obviously lending itself to that. So just finish off by talking about where you see that today, how peers working with that, and then where it's going in the future.
Yeah, not just about what we're doing with AI and ML. Like you can see some of the analysis we're trying to do with file event streams, especially from a cybersecurity perspective, trying to figure
Yes.
out what looks normal for a customer, right? At this time of day, this application, this person. But our customers are actually showing us a lot of different use cases. As an example, we're working with a government entity which has many satellite locations around the country that's collecting a tremendous amount of data. And we always talk about, data creation at the edge, right?
Yes.
Gartner loves to say it. 40% of all data is created at the edge. But if you create all that data at the edge, or you capture all that data at the edge, you probably don't want to put all your analysis at every single edge site. That's just way too much compute power, because to analyze anything takes a tremendous
Yeah.
amount of compute. So how do you take that data that's created at the edge, and then how do you seamlessly move it into one or more data centers and then analyze? And that's where, again, a distributed service comes in. You're able to kind of tie your edge, data center, and cloud all together and start moving and flowing your data wherever you need it to flow and move to. And so imagine if I did this example once on stage, and we said, imagine if that camera. I was in Vegas. I go, imagine that camera on that took a picture of me, immediately sent it up to the cloud, and then it had the America's 10 most wanted posters and it compared my picture. And immediately the camera saw me and it compared it and it goes 98% accuracy. That's Jimmy. He's most wanted. And then immediately sent a text alert to the police or the security department of that building. Imagine if you could tie all that together, right? Because that is cognitive services. That is a form of AI in the cloud today. And so putting it all that together, these are the workloads that we're seeing companies start to adopt and use every single day.
Yeah, I'm getting Minority Report vibes with that example, right? Exactly. When you said cognitive, the cogs, and we're kind of moving closer to that sort of world, aren't we? To a certain extent, where we've got that real time data analysis, and I mean, and are you seeing customers with a use case for putting pulling the data somewhere and then putting a local model and having it analyze the data through a chatbot or something like that? Is that something you're seeing today?
Absolutely. So we're talking to a lot of customers that say, they're gonna, because it's we're actually writing an article right now. How do you feed the AI beast? The AI beast is fed with data. And so you need to be able to take all of your data that is spread out all around the world and then feed it into one central system so that the AI engines can more efficiently kind of consume all that information to re-represent back to the end user, regardless of whatever they're trying to do. So we're seeing that a lot.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense, right? I think, and so you're traditionally at 30 years, you're well placed because of what you've done from a peer-to-peer perspective. You've been that GFS provider. You've got trusted, great code. You've got this, which I didn't. You've got the backup, but then you've also got the security angle, which I didn't even know about, which I think is like fantastic. I think that alone speaks volumes for what you guys are doing. And then you've got this ability to aggregate the data from different locations on the edge and bring it up and surface it to a location for that use case. Again, purposing the data when needed for the right person. That's kind of what you guys are doing. Okay, let's finish off by just giving us a little bit of, give us a sneak peek into what's coming, in the next, 12 months or so. How's Peer going to continue to, innovate and continue to stay ahead?
Oh gosh, even though we're a 30-year-old business, I think our development roadmaps, I think we've already mapped it out for the next 7. So some of the themes that we're seeing. Number one is scale. Number one is the scale problem. We all talk about how are we all, from a storage perspective, we're creating, I think we're doubling the amount of storage every other year nowadays. Yep. And so how do we keep pace with that? And so if we're moving all this data, obviously, and we're creating that much data, we need to make sure that our software continues to scale at that pace alongside of our storage partners, number one. Number two, we're seeing a much more, I think COVID just exacerbated this, much more distributed, even much more distributed. And so distributed even to the point of home office, right? So how do you take your corporate data sets and bring it back to the home office even? So think about the ability to now tie in your remote home workers anywhere they are, because they're no longer tethered, driving to an office where the telco room is, where this little server is anymore, right? You need that data at your fingertips to be productive and efficient. So we're going to be pushing out to the edge even farther. Then the third thing is go all around analysis. We've talked about how much data we're collecting. So if we're collecting all that data, it's time to do something with it and represent that information back to our customers so they can plan for their future.
Awesome. It sounds really cool. I mean, again, I love the company feel. I love what you guys are doing. And I think you're at the right point of this evolution of data, which again, like you said, is only just been accelerated by remote work, the pandemic, and now AI. Like, let's make data great, right? So, hey, thanks, Jimmy, for being on. This is a final reminder. Head to Anthony Spiteri at GTWGT Podcast, gtwgt.com. Again, please tell friends, tell family. It's a good show. We have a good time, right, Jimmy? That's the whole point.
We have a great time, no?
Yeah, we have great conversation around great tech. I know that I learn a lot talking to people like you. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for your time.
All right. Thanks, Jimmy. This has been episode 84 of Great Things with Great Tech.